Everyone, this is Kitty here, back with another BDSP OU video, and today I will be doing my BDSP OU viability rankings as of August of 2025. Now, how this is going to work is that I got my viability chart right here, ranked from top tier, obviously being S tier, along with the unviable mons being down here in unranked. And I got a list of mons here, and I will be ranking them on this viability ranking up here based off of how viable I think they are in the BDSP OU metagame as of this current date. Obviously, my opinions may change in the future, but at this current moment, this is what I think of each mon and how well they can perform in this metagame. So, without much further ado, let us get into it. Starting off first will be Blastoise. Now, firstly, I don't believe Blastoise is all that much viable in the BDSP OU metagame. I mean, looking at the roles Blastoise can fill, or I guess in this case, hypothetically would fill, one of which being, a shell smash sweeper on hyper offense teams. That role is oftentimes easily covered by other water types that it faces stiff competition against. And overall, I mean, the set itself doesn't really work all that well, especially when you run into common problems such as Clefable, Rotom Wash, and even something like Blissey, even though that'd be a bit more rare. It's not helping you with the stall matchup at all. And there's other offensive mons that do Blastoise's job, but much more consistently, and it's way easier for it to be able to chip down something such as Clefable or Rotom, as I previously mentioned. It's easier for those mons to chip down its threats, and Blastoise doesn't really do it all that well. It's more of a all or nothing mon, and it's really hard to get it active and make it a threat in the late game. So, and also not to forget the possibility of Blastoise being a spinner, and that's Blastoise as a spinner is more so outshined by Starmie, and I mean, there's not really much reason to use Blastoise as a spinner over Starmie other than, I guess, Blastoise's defense is higher, but other than that, I mean, Blastoise doesn't even have all that reliable recovery. You're better off just using Starmie if you really wanted a bulky water spinner. So that's Blastoise down there in unranked. Up next would be Nidoking. And, in the past, I think I've had Nidoking A- in most of my VRs. This time around, I have it down in B+, and that's just more so how it compares to some of the other breakers I will be ranking in this VR. It's Nidoking's a mod that can definitely put in its work, but it needs to get certain plays right in order to get that work, in order for it to be able to put in the work. And as a breaker, that's not a trait you really want to see out of your breaker, especially one that has as much breaking potential as Nidoking has. You prefer to be able to, click a button and be able to make progress pretty quickly. When you think about breakers, you think about those offensive teams that are trying to break teams down quickly. So ideally, your breaker is performing pretty well in the early game, and I mean, unless if Nidoking gets those plays right, getting that damage off in the early game is really hard for Nidoking to perform it consistently. Nidoking's biggest path to viability is just being able to break through Clef quite easily, and despite that, Nidoking itself doesn't really come in on Clef as well as you would want it to. Obviously, Nidoking comes in on Clef, but the damage you take over time can definitely hinder Nidoking's ability to break as well. So So that's Nidoking in B plus for me. Up next is Clefable, and I mean this mod is pretty much one of the first mods you think of when you think of BDSPOU. And that's definitely not without good reason. Clefable is the backbone of many defensive cores, many viable defensive cores that I should add. Great on any sort of team, offense, well, other than hyper offense where you probably have to run Demon Cliff, but other than that, offense, bulky offense, balance, stall, you name it, Clefable is pretty common on all of them. Unaware has allowed for Clefable to be one of the better answers into the best breaker in the tier in Garchomp. Being able to survive, the SD variants where Garchomp is not able to set up on Clef because of Unaware, obviously. And on top of all that, Clefable is able to act as its own win con with calm mindsets. That even though it is at times pretty hard to, against more competent players, it is sometimes hard to win with those calm mindsets. But it's definitely a threat that your opponent has to take into account throughout the course of a game. And if your opponent isn't careful enough, Calm Mind Clef can definitely come away with the win. So that's Cliff up there in A+. Great mod all around. It has... I'd say a lot of people have figured out how to play around it in recent days. But it's still definitely a great mon in its own right. It's still definitely a threatening mon, not only in the builder, but also in-game as well. Poliwrath, I got Poliwrath in about C tier. For what Poliwrath is supposed to do, it does it pretty well, and that's to be able to wall off mons such as Weavile and Infernape, on both your teams, namely Stall. I used Poliwrath myself twice in BDSP playoff finals, and it did its role pretty well, and then some. When you look at these Stall teams, they usually will switch into Weavile, decently well. Obviously, if you have a Stall team that's getting ran over by Weavile, something's wrong. But Poliwrath is a good security blanket for those stall teams, just to ensure that, something such as Weavile doesn't flinch your Skarmory and all of a sudden you lose to Icicle Crash, or, Weavile breaks through your Clef and all of a sudden Throat Chop is really threatening. Poliwrath is able to provide that security blanket that, to prevent Weavile from breaking through your fatter teams. And alongside of that, it has great utility, and obviously Scald is a great move, along with Circle Throw being able to act as a phasing move. And on top of all that, another great mon that Poliwrath is good into is Scizor, for the reasons I just mentioned. Poliwrath has access to Scald along with Circle Throw. Scizor will never be able to set up on Poliwrath. Obviously, if you're running, Stall, you probably aren't losing to Scizor anyways. But as I previously mentioned with Weavile, it's also another great security blanket. Since Stall doesn't always go the way you plan it to. So that's Poliwrath down there in C. Obviously, the reason why I don't have it higher is because of how hard it is to fit on more offensive play styles. You're never going to see a Poliwrath on an offense, or even like something like a bulky offense team. Even balance, I would have a hard time fitting Poliwrath on. It's mostly a stall mod, but it does fit its niche pretty well. Up next, Alakazam. Up there in A tier for sure. At worst, it's A tier. You look at Alakazam, and for BDSP move pool, it's pretty great. It has a pretty great move pool. Has really good breaking power with Life Orb. and its speed tier is amazing. It's phenomenal, only outdone by Weavile. And you look at the mons that Alakazam's able to come in and revenge kill, and you see mons such as Starmie, Latias, and Infernape, all mons that are usually really hard to outpace. And Alakazam's not only able to outpace those three mons, but Alakazam is also very much able to threaten to revenge kill those three mons. And has a great matchup into all of these special walls of the metagame. Most of the special walls have that psychic typing. Mew, Celebi, even something like Slowking, which kind of comes in on it a little bit, but not amazingly if it's at like +2, and Slowking has a little bit of chip. Blissey doesn't want to come in on Side Shock. Your only like super like your only good answer is Scizor, who is rather vulnerable to having to take on several rounds of chip from other mons that might have to cover. So if you're able to break past Scizor, all of a sudden Alakazam oftentimes becomes very threatening to clean up the game in the late game. So you have that combination of really good breaking power with Life Orb, along with Alakazam's really good speed tier, and you have a mon that can be really scary if it gets the help that it needs in certain matchups, or even just simply playing well. A well played Alakazam can be one of the scarier things in the metagame. And its only like huge flaw is how weak it is to priority, and I mean physical priority. I should probably elaborate. With that really weak defensive stat. But I mean, on the special side, it's not outright terrible. I mean, it can still take some special moves in that sense. Bulky Scarf, Rotom Wash. I think it lives 2 Volt Switches from Bulky Scarf, Rotom Wash. Which is, I mean, for Alakazam, that's a pretty good feat. So I mean, when you have all of those traits together, you have a pretty good mon. And Psychic type Psychic is a pretty good move in the metagame. Scizor's obviously not a mon you want to have your Psychic type against, but other than that, it matches up pretty well into the rest of the metagame. Up next is Tentacruel, and it's unranked for the same reason why I believe that Blastoise, defensive Blastoise with spin, is unranked. You're better off just using Starmie in most cases, and to on top of all that, with Tentacruel's poison typing, you're all of a sudden now more scared of running into Heatran's Earth Power, and as a bulky water, the mon that you for sure want to have a good matchup against is Heatran. And does Tentacruel do that? I mean, not forever. Tentacruel can't come in on Heatran forever. Eventually it's going to be knocked into Earth Power range. I don't know where that range is, but it's definitely a lot earlier than you would want it to be. So that's Tentacruel up there. I mean, well, not up there, more so down there in unranked. Slowbro, I feel like I'm pounding a similar theme here in the last 2 months. Slowbro, once again, is, as I mentioned with Tentacruel, it's not a mon that you're super comfortable switching in on Heatran. It's a bulky water, more specifically. You're not super comfortable switching in on Heatran. One misplay in that interaction, and all of a sudden you're trading 40% on Heatran for your bulky water that's supposed to beat Heatran, which is obviously not an amazing trade. Other than that, I mean, Slowbro itself is pretty good. I just think that Slowbro's ability or lack of thereof um, to switch into Heatran, barring forcing it to hold a shed shell, but I mean that's a pretty big sacrifice to give up in order, uh, in contrast to being able to run leftovers on any other bulky water. Um, but yeah, having to run shed shell on your bulky water just to not die to Heatran feels like a really awkward spot to put your team building in. And I mean, is it worth it? I mean, sometimes it is. There's other mons that can definitely switch into Heatran if you need it, but your bulky water definitely should be one of those mons. And Slowbro, as I mentioned several times, doesn't really do this amazingly as well as you would like your bulky water to. Cloyster, it's for the same reasons I mentioned for Tentacruel and Slowbro. And Blastoise as well. Shell Smash, you're walled off by Clef forever. Rotom Wash gives you a lot of trouble. Milotic gives you a lot of trouble. Suicune annoys you. I don't know what the role is against Tangrowth. It probably kills with rocks. But I mean, a lot of mons like Azu probably lives both your stabs. Like even something like Azu that isn't really all that bulky. Scizor probably does pretty well against you. And if you're at -1 defense, you might be in range of like an offensive bullet punch. So I mean, like all Clefable, Rotom Wash, and Scizor are all really common. And Shell Smash Cloyster has to be wary of those mons, which are pretty much on every single team in the history of this metagame. So that's one reason. Regarding spin, it's for the same reasons I brought up for Tentacruel and Blastoise. Starmie is just much better. It has recovery. It doesn't have a 40 or whatever Cloyster's special defense stat is. Q-Trade. Cloyster can't switch in on Heatran at all. It probably takes a shit ton from Magma. Let alone one of its other stabs not stabs, but one of its other coverage moves that wouldn't hit as hard, but it's guaranteed to hit. The Cloyster interaction against Heatran is definitely not great. So there's your reasoning behind that. Up next is Starmie. After all the glazing I've done for Starmie up to this point, I feel like it would be an injustice to not rank it as high as I have right now. Offensively, it used to be really great offensively. I mean, I'm saying that as if it's not great offensively now, but there was a point where, a lot of people believed that maybe this was up there near, close to like maybe an S- tier or even like an S tier. S tier might be pushing it a little bit. But needless to say, offensive Starmie with Pump Beam, and along with your choice of Psychic in order to hit something like Rotom Wash, or Thunderbolt in order to hit the other bulky waters such as Milotic and Suicune, or even something like Slowking. It made Starmie a big threat to be considered with, on top of Analytic that allows you to, with Starmie's speed tier too, you don't get that shortage of opportunities to take advantage of Analytic. Absolutely smashing whatever comes in. Analytic allows it to get past things such as Scizor or Clefable a lot easier than it normally would. And it's died down a little bit with the increase of usage in special defense walls such as Mew. But overall, it's still pretty solid offensively, and defensively, it's probably just as good. You still have Starmie's great speed tier that lets it outspeed Latias, Infernape, Garchomp, latter two probably being more important. Um, and you get it. It gets access to spin. It's the only good spinner in the meta game. And in which case, obviously, I think if you were to ask 100 Mons players, pretty much every single one of them would say spin is better than defog. If every single Mon got rapid spin or defog, they would all run spin. And Starmie is pretty much the only viable spinner in the metagame. So Starmie does have that going for it. And, it has, a great move in Scald. I don't think I really need to give all that much of an introduction to Scald. Being able to burn pretty much anything that comes in, even if it's something that Starmie itself doesn't outright beat, such as, like, as I mentioned, Mew, or, well, not really Roserade, the Rotom forms, Rotom Wash, being able to burn something like a Scarf Rotom Wash, that hinders its longevity is pretty good, as it turns out. And, having Ice Beam in order to prevent Gliscor from getting too comfortable for you, along with making sure Garchomp doesn't run rampant, that is also a great move to have. And then, obviously, Recover. As I mentioned, the 3 spinners I claimed were unviable do not have access to this, and Starmie does, and that is what I think is the huge separator between a Mon like Starmie and a Mon such as Tentacruel. So that's why I have Starmie all the way up there in A+. Tauros, I might be a bit generous here. Maybe I have a little bit bias towards this Mon. But I think it's about C tier. In my opinion, Tauros is just one of those Mons that it will kick your ass the first game you see it, because unless if you played this metagame before, you'll have no idea what this thing is running. Because what it runs is so outrageous that if you had common sense, you wouldn't guess what it ran. And that is Rock Climb, EQ, Fire Blast, and Blizzard, with the latter 2 moves obviously targeting, Fire Blast obviously targeting Scizor, and Blizzard targeting Mons such as Gliscor and Garchomp. And I mean, it's just a funny set. Like, if your opponent's never faced a Tauros before, it will probably end up putting in work. Otherwise, your opponent will probably have somewhat of an idea on how to play around it. It becomes more of a prediction reliant breaker, like Nidoking, with the added nerf of 3 of its 4 moves being pretty high risk of missing. That being obviously Rock Climb, Fire Blast, and Blizzard. But I mean, it's still glorious. So the one time it works, and I mean, it can still definitely put in work even against some competent players if it finds the proper matchup to do so. So that is Tauros and C, and Gyarados I'm going to have down here in B-, and it's more so like a hyper offense Mon that's more equipped to take on both your playstyle teams, with the most common set being lefties, waterfall, holding lefties, but also with the moves Waterfall, Crunch, BD, and Taunt. Taunt more so to prevent a Mon such as Clefable being the heal, which will allow for Gyarados' teammates to take advantage of a chipped Clefable. It's more so a Mon on hyper offense that I feel like it's not supposed to sweep itself, but it's more so to help out its teammates in the process of trying to be threatening in itself. Obviously, that means that Gyarados itself oftentimes doesn't, oftentimes you're going to end up trading with Gyarados, but most of the time in hyper offense, you're mostly fine with that as long as Gyarados is able to do its job pretty effectively. And, if you play it right, you most certainly can. So that's Gyarados down there in B minus. Up next is Aerodactyl, and Aerodactyl I'm going to have in C tier. Only for the reason that Aerodactyl is the fastest rock setter in the metagame. Other than that, there's not really much to comment about this mon. Its speed tier is pretty much the only reason why I'm putting it up here in C. You could probably use this if you believe that your hyper offense team does not like to see mirrors for some reason. But I mean, most of the time, if you're really concerned about speed tier, you're probably going to end up using Azelf anyways. But I mean, Aerodactyl's there if you just really want to ensure it. So that's Aerodactyl down there in C. Snorlax. Snorlax is another mon that, in the past I definitely had higher. But I think B minus is probably about where it's at. It might even be into that low B tier. But I think my reasoning behind. Well, first off, I'll start with the reason why I think Snorlax is good. Its curse set is pretty. It can be pretty threatening into a lot of teams, with the ability to, obviously be a bulky win con, along with being able to soak up certain special threats, most namely Starmie, offensive Starmie being one of them. Along with, just being annoying to anything that generally doesn't like taking a hit or doesn't like taking a para. Obviously with Snorlax you get it doesn't have return in this meta game, so it's running Body Slam, which means even something that threads it out offensively, such as Garchomp. Garchomp can't really take a Body Slam because it doesn't want to get parried. And obviously Curselax, pretty infamous in the Smogon, for how much it's done, especially in Gen 2. BDSP is obviously not as spectacular, but it still definitely has done its job in a lot of scenarios. The limitation Snorlax has in the metagame is that with so many steals, roaming around, like somebody like Scizor, or, very, very importantly, Heatran, Snorlax is oftentimes forced to run Earthquake just so it's able to nudge past those mons. And that means Snorlax, if it's running Earthquake, or, even something like Crunch in order to deal with Miss Magius, it's forced to drop Sleep Talk, which means during those turns that Snorlax is asleep, it is insanely passive. And if you're forced to switch out, that makes Snorlax... It's very hard to switch Snorlax out while it's asleep, and then try to get it back into the game. That is a very hard task to do. Without giving up too much momentum and putting too much pressure on your other 5 teammates. That is something that's very, very... It puts a lot of stress on a lot of teams to cover for those, multiple turns. Snorlax's passive nature while asleep. And, a lot of these teams are designed to be bulkier, which means there's more turns where Snorlax is, in those rest turns, which puts more pressure on those, bulky offense balanced teams to, survive for that long until Snorlax is able to get back up and running again. There's definitely... Snorlax has some positive traits. Once again, I would have had this in B tier at some point, recently even. But I think Snorlax's passivity is not even a word. Passive nature, I don't know why I'm saying passivity. That's not even a word. Pacifist, I guess, would be more of a better word. But not really even. Where was I at? But yeah, it's just Snorlax being passive in general That's why I have it back down to B minus. Zapdos. I used to have Zapdos in. Well, I used to have it in B minus, and probably as of last week even, I would have had Zapdos in B, and now I'm really starting. I'm really starting to believe this mod is pretty solid. Uh, it's been a meme since forever that this mon can't hit ground types at all, and it's worthless because of that. And the fact of the matter is, this mon was not meant to be used offensively, so that ends up not really being all that much of a problem. And the rest of Zapdos' traits are so good, especially in a Sinnoh-Dex metagame, that it's still fine even without being able to hit Gliscor or Garchomp or, even something like Mamoswine or Nidoking. It is completely fine with that because its stats are... Its bulk is insane, its speed tier is good enough for it to get by, and its ability in static is, in a metagame where you don't have Rocky Helmet, which means there's very limited ways to be able to punish contact, static is a pretty damn good ability, especially if you're looking at something like, as I previously mentioned, Scizor, Infernape. That's a very good deterrent for those two mons, especially the latter that isn't at all scared of, the other 30% status chance of Heatran's Flame Body. So, Zapdos itself is pretty good at deterring physical moves and is, also as well, not terrible special defensively either. With the combination of, a really good bulk and a pretty decent speed tier, along with, static is an amazing ability, along with, discharge being able to, it's pretty much a paralyzed heaven with Zapdos. And, that's people, I think even BDSP players have undermined this mon for so long just because of its inability to hit grounds that, a lot, we never really considered the upsides of Zapdos, and that is just coming to fruition just now. So I'm definitely excited to see, how in the future, with, I think, BDSP Premier League just around the corner, how people play around this mod, with, its usage is probably going to be way higher than it was in the last iteration, and I'm sure it's going to perform very well. In the games it has been in, it has performed up to that B plus standard, and I'm definitely interested to see if anything else comes out of this. If anything else comes out of Zapdos, increasing in viability, or if Zapdos ends up, being better than even I think it is, and I think I'm probably one of the higher people on Zapdos. So definitely interesting times ahead for Zapdos. Up next is Zapdos' brother, I guess. Not really sure how to say it. But regardless, Moltres, it's really only reaching C tier because of its stall viability, assuming that you're able to keep rocks off. Oftentimes being forced to pair up with Starmie, but otherwise, it is pretty solid. I mentioned how good of an ability Static is, and Flame Body is no different in this regard, and I'm sure I will touch on this even more in when I'm covering Heatran. But Flame Body is pretty much Moltres' niche. Along with, as I said, for Zapdos, it has pretty good stats for this power level of a metagame. Up next is Dragonite, and I might be a little bit low on Dragonite, as contrary to what I said Zapdos was. But overall, I think this is still a pretty good mod. It might even be 8. That might be stretching it a little bit. But I mean, it's still pretty good. I mean, you're not going to be running Dragon Dance sets a whole lot, mainly because Clefable pretty much walls you to hell and back. But it's still a pretty solid mod, especially with the set rising nowadays in Choice Band. You threaten Clefable just a little bit more, and if you're able to pair up a Choice Band Dragonite with something that annoys Clef a lot, such as, one of the favorite teams that I've seen and played against was a team with, Choice Band Dragonite along with Whirlwind Scarm. Obviously, with the Scarm's role being that it has, not only as a spiker, but it also has Whirlwind, which prevents Clefable from being able to heal itself with Witch. So, something like that, could definitely open up Dragonite to being pretty threatening in the late game, assuming that, you have the support to be able to bully a mon such as Clefable, which is becoming more common nowadays, to have mons that are able to deal with Clefable. So, definitely a threatening mon, even if it's not able to deal with something like Clefable itself. Up next is Feraligatr, and this Feraligatr is one of those mons where one day I think Feraligatr is amazing and he's up there in B+, and oh my god, he's such sheer force waterfall and coverage and all that jazz. And then there's other days where it's like nothing for this mon actually works. It's walled off by all the bulky waters. It's walled off by Clef. And there's just nothing in the metagame favors Feraligatr. So I think B-tier mix is somewhat fair for it. While it does have its struggles against the bulky waters along with Clef, if you're able to find a way to chip down those bulky waters in Clef, oftentimes you're probably going to have this on HO in that worst offense. Chipping down those mons should definitely be more than possible. In which case, obviously, would make Feraligatr a threatening mon. But if you're unable to do that, Feraligatr just kind of becomes dead weight on the team, which is why it's kind of a double-edged sword. When Feraligatr works, it works amazingly, and when it doesn't work, it kind of just falls flat on its face and kind of more so acts as a cheerleader. So there's the rationale behind Gator in B. Azumarill is another solid A- mon. Like I said with Dragonite, I don't really like the setup set in Belly Drum. For the same reason I had for Dragonite, Clefable just kind of stonewalls you, and to even add onto that, something such as Rotom Wash or Milotic kind of just goes in front of your face and stops your sweep entirely. So that's why I like Azumarill's Choice Band sets a lot more. It's a lot more threatening. As the breaker, you have more room for error. You can afford to be wrong more than something like Nidoking. You have a plethora of opportunities just because Azumarill is also bulk, has pretty good natural bulk, which will allow you to have a lot of opportunities to break through those fatter teams with Azumarill. Even if its speed tier isn't all that amazing, you break through Clef with Band. You can easily break through something like Scizor. I believe you break through Scarm, assuming you're faster. In which case, obviously, you would be running less bulk if you're faster than Scarm. But I mean, it pretty much threatens to break through a majority of the metagame, which is great. I mean, you're threatening to pick up a kill in a lot of mods, and that is what your breaker is supposed to do. And Azumarill does a pretty damn good job of that. Up next is Quagsire, and he's more so down in C tier. In the past, he might. I know at some point he had like a niche of being a water absorber because we had a very big Starmie crisis. But that role has pretty much been mostly filled at this point, and there is not as big of a need to really have Quagsire. I mean, Unaware, the only niche Quagsire has for Unaware sets is if you wanted to run Toxic. Other than that, I mean, it's worse into Garchomp. It's probably worse into a majority of things that you'd want Quagsire to wall off, really. In comparison to Clef, that is. And Water Absorb sets, as I mentioned, there's Mew, there's Gastrodon, there's Celebi, there's Rose. Even something like, Latias, as long as you don't switch it in on Ice Beam, is, kind of fine. There's Slowking, too. You have all those mons that, work just fine in the Starmie. So do you really want to, use a slot on Water Absorb Quagsire? That feels a bit, that feels like a stretch. It feels a lot more of a stretch now than it did, maybe a year ago. So that's Quagsire down there in C. Espeon, this might be slightly controversial, especially after I put Aerodactyl in C for being a fast rocker. But I'm putting Espeon down in unranked for the screen. Dual screens isn't really all that viable, and if you were running dual screen, I mean, you wouldn't really run dual screens on anyway. So, if you'd run dual screens, you'd run dual screens on like Azelf. You probably wouldn't run it on this, and if you're looking into like somebody like a Specs Breaker, like an offensive Espeon, we have two offensive mons in A+ and A tier respectively, and one of the niche you're looking for Espeon is probably very likely found in one of these two mons. So, Magic Balance is nice, but that's the only thing I can really say about using Espeon in this metagame. So that's Espeon down in unranked. Slowking up there is probably up there in B. Unlike Slowbro, its brother counterpart, Slowking is actually able to come in on Heatran and be pretty comfortable against it. Even if you get a play wrong, you should be able to recover just fine. And, it's able to impede progress on, others, potentially threatening mons, such as, something such as Latias. It comes in on Rotom Wash, probably comes in on Rotom Wash decently if it's not special attack invested. Even something like Mew, probably Full Switch Mew doesn't do a whole lot to it. It's a pretty safe switch in. And if you're looking into future side support, Slowking is probably your best bet. And if you want to be able to call mine up with Latias as well, with an Ice Beam set, Slowking is definitely capable of that. So, you have all of that, and it's not a four moves. It's not a it's not a mod that's forced to run four moves. It can definitely run a variety of different sets depending on what the team needs at that time. If the team needs speed control, Slowking can run Thunder Wave. If the team needs, a potential like not a primary win con, but a potential, Calm Mind win con, Slowking can also do that. If it needs Future Sight support, Future Sight support isn't amazing in the metagame, especially with Slowking and Slowbro both not having teleport. But Slowking is probably one of your better bets in Future Sight support. So that's why Slowking is up in B. I might have allured to this earlier when I said Starmie was the only viable spinner in the tier, but it's pretty safe to say that Fortress is unranked. And you look at Fortress's matchups into rockers. Well, two of the most common rockers are oftentimes running fire moves, which evaporate Fortress immediately, and that's not great. Not to mention, along with Fortress's inability to recover any HP at all outside of lefties. So when you have a bad matchup into Heatran and Fire Blast Garchomp, along with you get trapped by Magnezone in those matchups. You pretty much can't spin in those matchups, because if you spin, then you lose your Fortress to Magnezone, and next time rocks come up, rocks are permanent. So you have those three, and spinning with Fortress in a lot of matchups can oftentimes end up being pretty hard to do effectively. And if that's your form of hazard removal, then you're going to end up having a lot of negative hazard matchups, which is obviously not optimal. Up next is Quillfish, residing in and around C tier for the lone purpose of Quillfish being a pretty damn good rain abuser. Swift Swim plus SD, along with its poison typing, allowing it to breeze past mons that would otherwise be pretty annoying for rain, such as Celebi and Tangrowth, and Rosary too, on that matter. That's a pretty good trait to have. And Boom is allowing for it to completely wash away Latias or Milotic in those cases. And by Boom, I obviously mean Explosion. It allows for Quillfish to blow past those two mons, no pun intended. But the dual stat combination, and obviously, Waterfall is boosted under Rain, and Swift Swim, its speed tier with Swift Swim obviously allows for you to run adamant sets and not worry about being outsped there. So all that kind of combines into Quillfish being a very valuable member on Rain. Now, it's not completely mandatory on Rain. You probably see Quillfish on, I would say, 90% of Rain teams, but you won't see you're not seeing Quillfish on every single Rain team. So that's what bumps it down a little bit to see, because you're not going to see Quillfish otherwise. But it's still a pretty solid mod. Up next is the first S tier of the video, and that is going to go to Scizor, which is arguably the best mon in the metagame. Its only negative trait is, being slow, and even that trait is outdone by it having a boosted priority move. And, it's pretty bulky, it's pretty strong, and it's able to offer itself as a pretty threatening win con if you get, one of like 3 mons out of the way that you might face. That being like Heatran, Infernape, Magnezone. Maybe Rotom Wash. It's like a bulkier Rotom Wash. If you chip down if you chip down a couple other mons, I guess like something like Milotic, the bulky waters, but like most of those mons you can chip down pretty easily for Scizor. Or at the very least, you have the teammates to support Scizor with that are able to take down those mons. And once those mons are taken care of, winning the game with Scizor can be pretty elementary. Has great bulk, has access to roots to complement that great bulk. If you don't want to have Scizor as a win con, if you don't have the room for that, you need a defogger. Scizor can take care of that as well. One of the better switch-ins to Latias, which would otherwise be a very imposing mon on the metagame. Yeah, I mean, you have all that at Scizor's disposal, and only a couple of mons that like completely dunk on it. But I mean, even those mons like Heatran doesn't have any form of recovery. Magnezone doesn't have any form of recovery. Infernape doesn't have. Infernape is usually not running recovery at all unless if it's mixed with Slack Off. Rotom Wash doesn't have any form of passive recovery. Milotic isn't super common. So, I mean, pretty much all the mons I just mentioned, other than Milotic, which isn't insanely common, all the mons I mentioned all don't have great forms of recovery, which means they're all decently. You can chip them down. And that makes it way easier to win with a mon like Scizor. Especially, like, once you get those mons out of the way, as I said, like, winning with Scizor is it's pretty easy. Once you get to, like, that +4, +6 range, with, Metal Plate's able to breeze past even something like Clap. I mean, I could ramble on and on about this mon, and I probably wouldn't even get to the surface just of how flexible this mon is, and just how many. There's so many spreads that you could have for this mon realistically too. Like you can run offensive investment with Adamant. You can run fast Scizor, which a lot of people like to do with win con sets. You can run, mixed defense Scizor, or you can even run a very physically defensive Scizor if you're really concerned about something such as Weavile. Scizor is probably one of the better Weavile switches in the game in a metagame where there isn't a whole lot of switch-ins. You can run especially defensive Scizor if you need help with something such as Latias, and I mean. There's just so much. This mod is so flexible and so splashable that you could put it on so many teams. I used to have Scizor on so many of my teams. It feels really hard to not use Scizor. That's how good it can be in this metagame. So that's Scizor up there in S tier, and after rattling off for it on such a long time. I don't know, I might need to pick up the pace a little bit. Heracross is in B tier. Guts Flame Orb goes crazy on any sort of bulky teams. Probably one of your better mods into those archetypes of teams, the other being Crodont. And, I mean, while you don't necessarily auto-win against those styles of teams, Heracross is probably about as close as you can get to it. The other player would have to play super well in order to not lose to this if they're running a bulky team. But into more offensive teams is where Heracross tends to struggle. just because it's just not it has alright speed, but it's not fast enough uh to really be able to keep up with, certain mons such as like, the Garchomps of the world, the Latias's of the world, the Starmies of the world, uh even, the Zams of the world, um the Scarf Rotom Washes of the world. No, I mean its special bulk is pretty good, but not good enough to, especially with Heracross taking burn all the time. Its special bulk is not good enough to keep it in the game long enough in those offensive matchups. Up next is Skarmory. It's up there in A minus for sure. I mean, it's one of your better answers to Weavile or any other physical threat for that matter. I don't think I really need to elaborate on how defensively bulky Skarmory is, along with the addition of having spikes in a metagame where those are pretty rare to have, and with spikes you're able to annoy something like Clef a little bit more, and that gives you the opportunity to open up some of your other teammates that would hate having Clef on the field. Great defensive typing, in which case I think I don't need to really talk too much about. But with the addition of spikes, you're able to open up a lot of teammates. A lot of teammates really love to see Clef all the way, and spikes is one of those ways where you can definitely assure that. And I talked about it earlier with Dragonite, where Skarmory can set up spikes, and Clef tries to get a wish off, and you're able to whirlwind it away because it goes through Protect for some reason, but Clef can't heal off against you, and now you have it phased out at 60-70%, and all of a sudden, something like Garchomp becomes really scary. Scarf and Fernet becomes scarier. Latias does not become. Latias is scarier. Long Life Orb Mamoswine is scarier. Weavile is a lot scarier because you don't have that extra cushion with Clefable that you normally have. Non SD Scizor. I mean not non-SD. Non Iron Coat or Metal Plate Scizor, I should say, becomes a lot more threatening, although you probably wouldn't pair up Scizor with Skarm. That's another example of a potential application that, Skarmory's ability to chip Clef, not chip Clef, but keep Clef low, just how much it's able to provide for the rest of the team. Kingdra is probably going to be, it's around B tier. Now, it's not B tier for the reason of how splashable it can be, or, how great. I mean, it has one great set, and that is Choice Specs under Rain. The other set you would see is Double Dance Kritra on Hyper Offense teams, but you don't really see that a whole lot. But I do think it is viable enough to bump it up one tier where I would normally have Rain as. So that's the reasoning behind Kingdra being up there in B. Choice Specs, Kingdra in Rain is probably one of the scarier things you can encounter in the entire metagame. It's really hard to stave off unless if you have, Celebi, Rose Raid, but you have to get the plays right. Slow King or Blissey, one of those four mons, and Celebi is kind of becoming more niche now. You're not really seeing Slow King much at all. I mean, Slow King's kind of just an auto loss for Rain in most scenarios. or like melodic, I suppose. But most of those bulky waters are like kind of rare. But I mean, those are the ones you'd have to prevent Kingdra from just clicking Surf or Hydro Pump. Like, if you don't have those like 5 mons I just mentioned, Kingdra's clicking Surf, and there's not a lot you can do about it. Yeah, it just kind of shreds through your team. Unless if you have, a bulky water or, a grass mon. The Kingdra just kind of fucks you up. So that's the reasoning behind Kingdra up there in B. B minus for rain viability and up a 1 tier for the Crit set. Donphan, as a well-known man once said, this mon is a bona fide scrub. This mon can't play. And, I mean, he has some very strong attack stat, but, anything that flies can switch into EQ safely. Has Ice Shard for those flying types, but Ice Shard is fucking 40 base power, and even against Gliscor, I don't even think it's 2-hit KOing. It has knockoff, but once again, Gliscor, once it's poisoned, is just, it just sits there on knock anyways. It has spin, but like, you don't live long enough. This mod lasts literally like 3 fucking turns a game. Like, if you have a spinner, if you have a spin mon that lasts 3 fucking turns, it's not a reliable spin mon. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just being honest. If your hazard control lasts 3 to 4 turns a game, you should not be using that mon as your hazard control. You should be using something else that actually lasts for a while. It can actually get you, like, what happens? What happens if you're running Donphan into stall? What, you get rocks off 1 time, and then you get rocks off maybe twice. You get rocks off maybe twice, and then your Donphan dies, and then all of a sudden you're running You're running 5 mons with no removal against stall, and that is just a losing battle. So, like, why the fuck would you ever want to be in that scenario in the first place? Just don't fucking use Donphan. The only reason why this mon is even here in the first place is because, for some reason, people used this shit on ladder and kept this thing up way longer than this had any right to be. So there is my personal rant on Donphan being an eternal shitmon. If we want to talk about non-shitmons, we're better off talking about Miltank, the superior Gen 2, unique Gen 2, well, Donphan's not. The superior Gen 2 mon, let's just go with that. It's pretty solid. I mean, thick fat allows for it to be able to switch in on, Heatran pretty well, along with being able to come in on Weavile's Icicle Crash, out of all things. And, pretty good speed here, along with, as I mentioned for Snorlax, Body Slam can be a pain in the ass to deal with. And, Miltank's very unique niche in this metagame is that it's able to have room to have Heal Bell as a move, where the only other mon that can realistically do that is Clefable, but seeing Aromatherapy on Clefable is really rare, and if you're running Clefable with something like Gliscor, then it becomes super awkward, and you don't see Clefable run Aromatherapy a whole lot. But Miltank can run Heal Bell pretty well, and that allows for the rest of your team to become a lot more aggressive, and risking those skull birds or you know discharges or whatnot. The flame body burns. Uh, you know, it makes it so something like Scizor is much more free to U-turn because if Scizor gets burned, well, you have 8 heals bells in the back. You'll probably be pretty fine. And Scizor U-turns on Heatran, and now you have a Mon in that is able to heal bell. It's faster than Heatran, so it doesn't have to worry about taunt. And it threatens to do a great chunk of damage to Heatran with Earthquake. Its other attacking move alongside Body Slam. So all of that makes Miltank it's still pretty niche. Don't get me wrong, but all in all, like I said for Poliwrath, it does a pretty good job for fulfilling that certain niche it needs to fill in the metagame. Up next is Blissey. I think Blissey's another A-tier mon. You don't see Blissey a whole lot, but I feel like whenever you do see Blissey, it's a pain to deal with. And that should really not come as that much of a surprise. But it does feel like there's certain matchups where Blissey can kind of just sit on the opponent a good bit of the time, and not be super concerned about ever really dying. And to add on top of that, still has access to T-Waves, so it's able to paralyze. It kind of prevents certain mons from wanting to stay in on it, or wanting to make a certain not like a prediction, but certain stay-in plays that Infernape's more inclined to U-turn. I don't think there's really many buttons that I guess more so like a Scarf Infernape. Like a Scarf Infernape's more inclined to U-turn or close combat, because if Infernape clicks Flare Blitz, then not only does it take a whole lot of chip, but it's also going to end up getting paralyzed in the process. So that's like an application of it. It's able to T-Wave Weavile, a mon that could be threatening for both your teams that aren't super well prepared for it. It's able to T-Wave allows for it to have a fighting chance against Magma Heatran. It might not come out spectacularly well, but he might be able to not only come out on top on the one-on-one, but also come out on top of the one-on-one perfectly healthy. And that's especially great for especially since Heatran can sometimes be one of the better Blissey answers that the opposing team has. All that on top of Rocks, making it very, very good. It already would be very good on stall, but Rocks makes it that much better on stall structures and certain balance structures as well. Raikou, I have right around that B+ range. Raikou's one of those mons that always looks more threatening than it really is. And the reason why I say that is that the two sets Raikou's running, both of them oftentimes wish they had the benefits of the other set. When Raikou was running Choice Specs, it wishes that it had the ability to switch into other moves. When Raikou is running, Calm Mind, it wishes that it has the breaking power, the immediate breaking power that Choice Specs has. And, Raikou is definitely going to have one or the other, but Raikou can't have both. And that is, Raikou's biggest problem is just, this conundrum of well, do I want to be more of an immediate threat, or do I want to actually have the ability to change my moves at a given instance? So, like, if a Latias comes in, I'm not completely locked into a move like Scald, for an example, and all of a sudden Latias is, getting up, a free Draco or a free Call Mine on A4 switch in. Up next is Entei. And Entei is the turn 1 mon, where it's only viable, it's only really great until the Gliscor gets poisoned and it's no longer afraid of the Sacred Fire burn. Even beyond that, like, I think, how many times in this video have I mentioned the term bulky water? Entei also hates those. Entei has no real way of hitting those, and that is also definitely impeding onto Entei's progress as a breaker. It's not really a mon I've really seen in a long time. This mon might even, I think it's probably even B minus, to be honest. Which might be my hot. I don't even know if that's really all that hot. But like, why would you realistically use this? Because Infernape, for the most part, other than the fact that Entei gets extreme speed, and like, this gets extreme speed, I guess that's like a niche over Infernape. But like, for the most part, if you want a physical fire type breaker, you're probably using Infernape over Entei. Up next is Suicune, and Suicune's up here in B+ as well. It doesn't have great recovery. I mean, it doesn't really have a recovery at all, unless you're running Crocune. Most of the time you're going to be running Vincune. But Vincune is it's just scary mon to deal with, especially if, your team does not have great breaking power. With the, I'm losing my thoughts here. But I mean, Suicune's able to, at +1, Rotomosh is only a roll to break sub with Volt Switch. And there's not many. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of bulky waters, but at the, while at the same time, at neutral, Suicune can't really break past them. I mean, none of the bulky waters are able to break past Suicune, and the only bulky water that is faster than Suicune is Starmie. Who, I mean, with Starmie too, you're only getting like what, one chance to burn before you run out of Scald Key? To burn Suicune, that is. And Suicune's meanwhile getting all of its Calm Minds up very easily in front of Starmie, might I add. So that is, unless it's a Starmie, I suppose is like Thunderbolt, which I suppose is a set if you're not really all that concerned about Gliscor. But I mean, yeah, unless it's a Starmie's running Thunderbolt, Suicune's completely fine with it. Even mons such as, Celebi, or, something, even like Roserade to like kind of some extent, like once you're like +2 maybe. But like, even a mon like Celebi doesn't match up super well against Calm Mind Suicune. Celebi definitely has to keep track of its Giga Drain PP in order to make sure it doesn't run out too quickly and just become free setup fodder for Suicune. So, I mean, you look at those factors and you realize that the stuff that's supposed to be really good in the Suicune actually still has to be pretty cautious of pressure. So that's what makes Suicune pretty good. And I think, honestly, I'm a bit surprised this mon doesn't see more usage on, certain balanced squads. So definitely a really good mod in my opinion. Up next is Tyranitar, Who I had. Yeah, I think that's probably about right for Entei. Yeah, I have T-Tar down there in B minus. Uh, I think its best set nowadays is probably Bandit, to be honest. And even then, it's kind of an awkward set to give Tyranitar because Weavile's in the tier, and Crawdon's in the metagame, and both usually do Tyranitar's. They both do T-Tar's job just better. Um, even something like uh, choice like rocks are fine, I guess. Um, it's okay. You find an experienced player, they'll know what it does. Um, but like, you know, Tyranitar, Tyranitar also just doesn't have the teammates to properly support it, if that makes sense. Like, as I said before, like one of the most used mods in the metagame, I think it was the most used in playoffs, was Clefable, and I was talking about how good Unaware was. Well, you can't. Clefable doesn't work as well when Sand is up, and that's obviously a pro and a con. Obviously, your pro for Tyranitar is that, if you're playing against Clef, Clef can't heal. Clef isn't as durable against you, but at the same time, using Clefable is a lot harder to justify, given how it can't heal as reliably with leftovers with Sand up. You can't run Magic Art Clef, don't get me wrong, but that still leaves you at the mercy of something such as Garchomp potentially breaking through your team in that way. So that is why, Tyranitar it just feels like Tyranitar is just one of those mons where if you are building around it, you have to specialize around it. Not in the sense of like building a full-fledged Sand team. I don't mean it like that exaggerated, but you severely limit the amount of mons that you can use by putting Tyranitar in your builder. Another mon that I'm not as high on, especially in recent times, is Celebi. And it pretty much does what Mew does nowadays. It just has a grass typing, so it's able to switch in on, Breloom and Rotom Wash to get better. But for the most part, it's kind of just a Walmart Mew. I mean, the main problem I have with Celebi is that you have to justify using Celebi over a mon like Mew or like Laddie or defensive Starmie, and all three of them are very, very good in their own right. So being able to have a niche that justifies using it over all the three I just mentioned is very hard to do, and it's very specific, which makes it so that, I mean, Celebi's, in the terms of it can work on multiple teams, yeah, it's splashable, but it's not like a viable splashable. One of the three mons I mentioned probably fills that role better than Celebi does. And with that psychic typing, you're probably not going to be running, Celebi Latias. You're definitely not probably going to be running Celebi Mew, and you're probably not running something like Celebi Starmie. Just because, you don't want to stack up too much on your U-turn weeks. In that sense. So that's mostly the reason why I have Celebi as low as I do. I think I might be a bit lower on Celebi than I am on some of the other players in the metagame, but I do think Celebi has I think it's facing stiffer competition now, and it has definitely fallen off in terms of how it stacks up against the metagame. Like, as I said before, like, even against something like Suicune, Celebi isn't, like, heads above shoulders against something like me. Like Latias is better than Selby in that regard because if you're running Calm Mind Latias, then you still beat Calm Mind Suicune. Um, so I mean, like that's just even even against like a bulky water like Suicune, where you think Celebi would naturally have the best matchup, it probably still doesn't. Latias is still probably better in most cases. It's probably more reliable than Celebi would be. Granted, it's more of a specific scenario. It's not the whole picture, but that is just one example that came off the top of my head. Up next is Ludicolo. Once again, it kind of fills off a similar niche as Qwilfish does, where obviously instead of being the physical breaker in rain, Ludicolo is more so your special breaker in rain that's able to take advantage of, the bulky waters and grass types that would otherwise give rain fits. Nothing more to really add onto that. Gardevoir, I'm probably going to leave Gardevoir down in unranked, mainly due to the fact that the special walls, the special pivots, whatever you really want to call them, they've gotten a lot better, and that has hindered Gardevoir's ability to really break through anything all of that well. The bulky Draining Kiss, the Calm Mind Draining Kiss set that I've seen once in a friendly, it's definitely interesting. I would have to see more on it in order to actually properly rank it into Ski. But I don't think it is enough to propel it up the C tier. Breloom is up next, and Breloom's a solid B+ tier. I mean, I really like Breloom's Bandit set. Jolly Band is a pretty solid set. With being able to threaten the likes of Clefable, Gliscor, with Bullet Seed, and Magnezone with Force Palm, Technician boosted Force Palm, and Force Palm also has that chance of paralyzing, which is more so of an added bonus than anything. I mean, you're also able to threaten like something like Crawdon too. You get a free Force Palm off. Even if you get the Force Palm wrong into something like Clef, you can still have that chance of paralyzing it, which is obviously great. Force Palm also obviously hits Scizor. You got Mach for priority, as well as being more of a reliable way of hitting something such as Heatran, which is, I mean, it's possible that it outspeeds you. That's more of a safe bet against Heatran. Forces like a mon like Mamoswine or Weavile to consider something, to consider clicking Ice Shard, so they don't get absolutely walled by Mach Punch. Along with Rock Tomb, which is able, I believe, it 2-hit KOs non-bulky Latias. That is, I believe that's the main point of Rock Tomb. Is to be able to come in on Latias. And then obviously you have the added benefits of like Scar stats being able to run Spore, and obviously you have the Sword Stance sets, which are more common on HO. Spore, Sword Stance, Bullet Seed, and Mach Punch. Not as common on hyper offense teams as people from the outside would probably believe for it to be. But still definitely noteworthy. And obviously you have your more anti-bulk set in Toxic Orb, Focus Punch, Seed Bomb, Spore, and Sub, which is obviously more oftentimes going to be a bit bulkier. Granted, I kind of more so listed off what this can run, but it can definitely run a variety of sets, and I mean, I think the band set is easily its best set out of the four I mentioned. But I mean, anytime you have to respect Spore, that's a positive trait. Even if Braylon itself doesn't have Spore, that's it's something you have to respect, and something you can't just switch around willy nilly on. So that is Breloom in B+. Aggron, I am unfortunately going to have to relegate to unranked. Really only using this on Volturn teams, and there are usually other Mons that are able to fill in that role. They might not hit as hard as Aggron, but they definitely fill the role more consistently than Aggron would. Metacham, I'm also going to be putting in the same tier. With the rise of Mew, I just find him like you have to predict so well with this thing in order to actually make progress. And as I said with Nidoking, that's not really a trait you want to have out of a breaker. It's you have to predict so right, and high jump kick, Zen headbutt, ice punch, and filler, probably something like thunder punch for Skarm, and the Poke Waters, I suppose. But like you have to guess right in order to actually do much. And it doesn't feel all that rewarding to use on that end. Up next is Volbeat, which is basically the Rain placeholder in this viability ranking, due to the fact that Volbeat is pretty much mandatory on any given Rain team due to its access to Prankster Rain Dance, along with its ability to click U-turn, along with Prankster Encore and Thunder Wave being solid support options for its fellow sweepers. Up next is Crawdaunt, who is also residing up here in A-. Band sets, those hit about as hard as it would expect Crawdaunt to. Pretty much impossible to reliably switch in, unless if you're running something such as Poliwrath. I can't believe I forgot to mention Crawdaunt. But yeah, unless we have Poliwrath or Tangrowth. Where is Tangrowth? Did I not? Whatever. But yeah, like Crawdaunt's pretty much impossible to actually switch into, and yeah, I mean, it's really hard to switch into, and then you have the addition of potentially having life orb sets thrown at you, and that makes your life a lot harder when that life orb gets revealed on balanced teams, because now not only do you have to get the prediction right one time, but now you're in potentially in risk of having to get it right multiple times, and obviously that is very hard to do. Up next is Milotic, who is probably, I think it might be a hot take to call it B+. Milotic's kind of one of those mons that it was everything, but at the same time, it's so passive that it also doesn't do any damage. Oh, there's Tangrowth. Okay, I thought it was left off for a second. I was a bit nervous. But anyways, back on the topic. Like, it takes on a good majority of the metagame, but at the same time, other than Scald, like, it just doesn't make any progress at all. It really does zero damage into everything. Like, it's not even like a Blissey where you get size, like, it simultaneously beats everything and loses to everything because of just how passive it is. And it feels a lot. It's annoying to play against for sure, but at the same time, it just doesn't do anything. It just kind of sits there. Like this is kind of like your BDSP Toxapex, more so to say, just without knockoff. Really, um, like it's a Walmart Toxapex, I guess would be the proper way of putting it. Up next is Salamence, and I think he's fallen a little bit. I mean, the more recent, if you're not playing the metagame, you're probably a little bit surprised to see this low. But most of the time, this Salamence is oftentimes forced to run bulky sets where it's running Draco Meteor and Fire Blast, and then usually one of Pump or Earthquake along with Roost, which basically just makes this a Glide score that's a little bit better into Infernate, and that's just about like one of your only few niches, if not your only one. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of reason to use this mon other than it also has Intimidate too, which can be helpful on occasion, but you're not gonna be breaking this guy to every single game like you would for most of these high tiers. In which case, I guess should be obvious by the fact that it's in C tier with fucking Quillfish. But I mean, he's fine. Not much to note there. Speaking of noteworthy dragons, Latias is more than definitely one of those noteworthy mons. I'm on the edge of whether or not this mon is truly S tier. I mean, when I try to compare this to the other S tiers, I feel like the S tiers are just, no pun intended, a tier above Latias. So I feel like A plus is probably, I might get crucified for putting this in A plus. But it's definitely better. I have a more positive opinion about this in A plus than the other times I would have when putting this in A plus. Like, it doesn't have a great matchup into Scizor. Its matchup into Scizor isn't amazing. But other than that, I mean, it's really hard. It can be a pain to switch into, like even with Soldu, like even something like Unaware Clef can't switch into Psychic all that well. Like if you get Scizor Chip, then it opens up. Like you can't take on Calm Mindsets. The other Celebi can't do it. Celebi can only realistically try and U-turn for a little bit of chip on the Latias and hope that's just enough. My Lata can't really phase it because of... Well, my Lata can't phase it because if Latias clicks Draco and my Lata cases, then it resets Latias's Draco drop, which is definitely an intriguing interaction. But yeah, I mean, like, most of the special pivots, like I know I talked about earlier how the special pivots and the special walls kind of got better as the metagame evolved a little bit, but like, none of them are really all that prepared to 1v1 Latias. Like, even something like Gastrodon. Like, what is Gastrodon doing to Calm Mind Latias? What, just like, I suppose that it tries to get off Sludge Bomb poison. If it even has that. It probably doesn't have Sludge Bomb. Like, if Gastrodon has Sludge Bomb, then it probably just tries to poison Latias then. Jirachi, as I'm going to talk about in a couple seconds, is fake as hell. Even something like Heatran can get Brute Force past if it's not careful enough. And I haven't even talked about, I really like Specs too. where you're just more everything I just mentioned. You're a lot more threatening into, and Scizor has to be a lot more careful. Scizor ends up being a lot more passive around you as a result, since Scizor oftentimes needs to be healthy in order to take on those Dracos. So even Dracoing into Scizor like with specs, like that's not even like a terrible interaction to happen as the Latias player, because you're oftentimes forcing a pretty passive turn, or the Scizor U-turns, and your Latias has the potential to be pretty open for the later into the game with Scizor chipped. So yeah, Latias is, if it's not an S mon, it's definitely a very high A+ mon. I think it's the 5th best mon in the metagame. There's gonna be like a core 4 up here, and I think Latias is just outside that core 4, but definitely the 5th best mon in the metagame. Up next is Jirachi, who is a meme. It kind of takes Dracos from Latias, I guess, but when there's so many Garchomps, when there's so many Gliscors, when there's so many Heatrans, you can only do so much when your main form of recovery is Wish. If this got any sort of like recovery move that actually healed this HP in one turn, this probably would be a different story, but it's so easy just to chip this mon and render it out of commission later into the game. Like you're wide open to Garchomp, you're wide open to Weavile, you're wide open to Infernape, you're wide open to Mamoswine, you're wide open to Heatran. What other? You should be faster than Magnezone. But yeah, I guess you're forced into a U-turn against Magnezone. You're wide open against Nidoking. You don't love switching into Breloom. You're pretty wide open to a Azumarill. You're pretty wide open to Zam. You probably do. I don't think you do. Actually, no, you definitely do. You're like fine against Starmie, but once again, you're forced to Wish, which is pretty. Wish in itself is a pretty exploitable move, but it's just that the difference between Jirachi wishing and Clefable wishing is that Clefable's immune to setup, so being forced to use Protect isn't as bad for it, whereas Jirachi, you try to Protect on a Garchomp and all of a sudden it has Keys, and the rest of your team is very much susceptible to a +2 Garchomp. So it's just not worth having I don't know, this. There's nothing really going for this mon other than the Lati. The Lati resistance is neat, I guess, but that's about the extent of it. Up next is Infernape, who is also another very solid A+ mon. You look at it's kind of in the same realm as Azu and Cronut, where if you're running Band Infernape, nothing much. There's not a whole lot of things that can actually reliably switch into you. At least not reliably switch into you on a consistent basis. I guess, even something like Lati. Lati doesn't want to get U-turned. Dragonite doesn't really want to take too much chip. Azu, even then, you're limiting how many times Azu can come in. Cronut's going to take a shit ton of damage, and most notably, you have a breaker that has a pretty good matchup into Scizor, and if you want to add on to that good matchup into Scizor, you can run Slackout sets, and those make it so that it's a pretty hard game for Scizor to win. Um, and you have the added bonus of maybe catching something like a glass sword by surprise. Uh, and if I'm not a huge fan of Scarp, but you can definitely run Scarp, and that would allow for you to definitely threaten Laddie, Starmie, along with Weavile, all of which are pretty commonly fast mons that you would see. But obviously at the drawback of your Infernape not really being a breaker at that point, and more so your speed control. Up next is Empoleon. I just don't. I don't think it's quite as viable. Um, Once again, suffering from kind of the same problems. Like I guess it's all right into um what's it called, Latias. Um, and you do get rocks, which is kind of neat, right? This is probably like the closest to C tier for me. Like if you had this in C tier, I probably wouldn't argue it. I wouldn't argue against it. Um, but once again, like you're weak to Garchomp and you're not faster than it, obviously. You're trapped by Zone, which is not great. Rotom's probably not outright terrible, but getting Volt Switch definitely hurts. And I mean, once again, like there are definitely other ways. Like you already probably have or are looking into Scizor anyways. In most cases, so that kind of, for the most part, fills out the vast majority of Empoleon's niche, or would-be niche, in the metagame. Up next is, oh my god, why is this not working? Up next is Staraptor, following suit in B+. And you want to talk about a mon that is a self-proclaimed kamikaze. You got yourself Staraptor. Reckless Greatbird and Reckless Double Edge pretty much dumped on everything in the metagame. And close combat hits everything that those two moves don't already hit. Aside from like the only like one that pretty much walls you is Skarmory. And on top of all that, you have the added bonus of U-turn, which obviously allows you to play pretty safely. The main problem is that this mon tends to die pretty fucking quickly. You will, with the Rock's weakness on top of all the recoil it's taking, you will probably get off, 2 Brave Birds before this thing is, dies to priority or dies to its own recall or something of the sort. And on top of all that, if you don't get the play on like something like Heatran right, then you're at risk of potentially getting burned, which is obviously not good for something that wants to do as much damage as possible, such as the Raptor. Roserade, I got Roserade at about A-. In general, it's a pretty annoying mon to deal with, to be honest. Once again, like Skarmory, it's the other spiker in the metagame, and this mon just finds ways. Like it's usually not running Synthesis as its last. It's usually Giga, Sludge Bomb, Spikes, and Sleep Powder. But this mon just always finds ways to somehow get back up to full, and I will never, for the life of me, understand it. Um, but yeah, like other than that, like you got a good matchup into Rotom, pretty safe matchup into Rotom. If the Starmie isn't psychic, your matchup is all right. Even into the mons that's like hard walled against, such as Scizor and Heatran, and even something like Magnezone. Um, it's it's not fun for those mons to really switch in on Roserade, especially Scizor if it's the fog. Uh, those mons don't want to switch in on Sleep Powder. You don't want your Defogger to fall asleep because Roserade gets a spike or two up, and while your Defogger is fast asleep, and those are hazards that you're going to have to somehow find a way to remove in a short amount of time as well before it racks up too much. Outside of that, it's another mon that can deal with Clef pretty handily, and not only with its stab Sludge Bomb obviously beating Clef 101, but also with its spikes being able to put Clef into those ranges that it would normally live. Up next is Gastrodon, and I think Gastrodon's about to be pretty good into all the offensive water, not all of them, but the special offensive waters, Starmie and Rotom Wash, pretty much eliminates your problems with them entirely on its own. And it can just be annoying with scalding like that. This is also just your Magnezone switch in. This is also just your Heatran switch in. It just you probably don't have to worry about, like, if you have this with Clef, your Suicune problems are pretty much non-existent. I don't know the calcs against Nidoking. I'm not too familiar with any. Gastro's probably fine against Nidoking, I would think. But yeah, like, it's solid against like a lot of the special offensive threats, and to add on top of that, how do you deal with a special wall such as Gastrodon? Well, you try to bring in your Physiomon, but this also has access to Scald, so you can't. It's a lot harder to justify bringing something hard in on Gastrodon. In that sense, with Scald. And, obviously you have EQ, and then usually one of Ice Beam or Sludge Bomb as your filler. And I think even then, like, something like Sludge Bomb can be pretty annoying to switch into with the high poison chance. So, yeah, I got Gastrodon up in B. Probably the best. Let me make sure I'm not eating my words here. Yeah, the best Rotom Wash counter. Only thing that it doesn't like from Rotom Wash is Trick. Actually, no. I'd go second best. I'll bring up the. It's best or second best. I guess it depends on the set, really. But yeah, Gastrodon up in B. And up next is, what the fuck is going on? Up next is Miss Magius, who's also solidly in B plus tier. And this has mostly come. Well, first off, if you haven't noticed already, Gengar isn't on here, and that's just because Gengar is banned because of the nerf to the steel. Nerf to the steel type, which has allowed for ghost type moves to be neutral against it instead of resisted. And with Gengar gone, Miss Magius is pretty much your next best thing, and nothing really resists Shadow Ball. It's just kind of a free move. The three dark types in the tier are Groudon, which is not bulky, Weavile, which is Rock Squeak, and also not bulky. Miss Magius also has Missile Fire and Dazzling Gleam, both of which deter Weavile from ever coming in. at least not as a revenge kill. I mean, not as a direct switch in. It can definitely still revenge kill. Um, and Tyranitar, I mean, that's probably your best answer. But it's still, you don't really see Tyranitar all that often. Yeah, you don't see Tyranitar all that much. And I mean, like, the only normal type you really see commonly is Blissey. In which case, yeah, Miss Maggie probably isn't going to do much. But I forgot to mention what I really like running specs on this thing. That's the set I'm talking about right now. That tends to just blow past nearly everything. Like, I think even something like Heatran takes like 40, in which case without leftovers, that's a lot. Scizor takes a lot, Clefable takes a lot. And the few things that can maybe come in and take a hit, like a Poison Gliscor, if you get the drop on it, then that's just something. That's basically a free mon if you can get a drop on something like a Gliscor, like a Poison Gliscor, or as I said earlier, like a Heatran. That's basically just a free mon if you can get that 20% drop rate. The rest of the moves aren't really all that much worth talking about because Shadow Ball is just that good. Up next is Garchomp, and Garchomp can do pretty much everything you would want for it to do in this metagame. It gets Rocks Up, it can be a Mixed Breaker, it can be just a physical breaker with Poison Jab to annoy Clef and Togekiss. It can be your Speed Control, it can be your Choice Band Breaker, it can be mixed with Special Attack Investment and with Draco, although I'm not a huge fan of that set. Garchomp pretty much does everything, and it's pretty much good at everything. And to top that all off, as if you needed another reason to use Garchomp, it's also an electric immune. It's also a ground. So I mean, I'm probably not going to do justice enough on how long I'm going to talk about Garchomp, but I just hope that like this short and brief explanation of Garchomp just showcase like it can fit in any role you want. It can have SD, and be an SD breaker in that way. It can break through teams with Life Orb and threaten Clefable a little bit more. Like there's so many different sets you can use on Garchomp. It's really hard to play around it, really, because you have to figure out, okay, well, how offensive is this Garchomp? Is this Garchomp Choice Scarf? Can my Clefable switch in? How safely can my Clefable switch in on Garchomp? Does this Garchomp get up rocks at all? Is this Garchomp rocks? How does that impact? Like if I have something like a, I don't know, actually never. If I have like a Gliscor, like, do I want to try to defog the rocks away if this is the rocker? Like, this is all something you have to consider in the span of a game, and half of it isn't even relevant because Garchomp isn't even running that set. It's running something else. So, yeah, I try to do Garchomp justice here, and I even mentioned like Garchomp's bulk, really, which helps it out against switching in on Heatran if it really needs to, which is obviously as I mentioned throughout this video, a pretty positive trait to have. Yeah, being able to switch in onto Heatran when it's using its special sets with Fire Blast as its lone special attacking move. It actually doesn't need to drop its special defense at all. It doesn't need a special defense. Dropping nature, because it's so good, it already gets the rolls it needs on Skarmory and Tangrowth, most notably. So I mean, yeah, overall this mon's really, really solid. And I mean, I could probably ramble on and on more about this mon, but this video has gone on for way longer than it probably should be. Up next, I got is Lucario, who once again, yeah, I mean, it's the best. It's the best win con in the game, especially on hyper offense teams. Realistically, your best way of dealing with this is if you're running one of like Zap, Garchomp, or Gliscor. Otherwise, you're going to have huge. Otherwise, this is going to be a big problem for you. Pretty much, once it gets to +2, it's OHKOing a majority of the metagame. Especially if it's on the offensive side. Yeah, that +2 Life Orb card, especially when it's adamant. When it's adamant, it's even more of a pain to deal with. Yeah, +2 Lucario at with E-Speed, pretty much takes out most of the offensive metagame, and anything that would be stealed, such as like Scizor or Heatran, obviously does not want to take on close combat. Clef doesn't want to take on Meteor Mash. Yeah, like this has a great. I mean, speed tier is just good enough to where it doesn't have to really worry about Heatran at all. And I mean, for the most part, what's keeping this mon down is Gliscor, just how good it's put into Lucario, and it's frail. It's a combination of frailty along with Lucario seeming to need every single bit of HP he can get. Feels like half the time when Lucario loses a game, it's just because it didn't have enough time due to Life Orb taking it out before it can take out the opposing team. Up next is Weavile. I mean, this is like the most threatening mon in the builder, and when you play this in games, it's just about as annoying. A lot of times you're just gonna have to get the play right and try to limit how many opportunities it can get to break you down, most notably through Stealth Rock, or worst comes to worst, you try to get a cheesy Flame Body burn with Heatran. But I mean, this mon is super solid. Best viable speed tier in the metagame. That is not a Scarfer. And I mean, its dual stab is great. Its breaking power is great. A lot of great things to mention about Weavile. I mean, as I said before, it's one of the most threatening mons in the builder. And definitely one of the more threatening mons you can definitely encounter in the game. Once again, like in finals, I literally ran Poliwrath because I was so fucking scared of seeing this mon. And in the builder, it was just a complete pain to have to try to build against. So, definitely a great mon that I might not be giving enough flowers to even then. Magnezone, once again, another A- mon. I mean, with all the steel types in the game, it's quite easy. I mean, I pretty much went on for like 10 minutes about how good Scizor is. Magnezone Trap Stat basically makes it ineffective. Heatran, if it's slower, you're able to get in some chip on it. Those two are pretty much the only two steel type, noteworthy steel types. Oh, Skarmory as well. You're able to trap Skarmory, assuming that the Scar isn't running Shed Shell, in which case nowadays most of the time it isn't anyways. So there's that. But I mean, other than that, I mean, Zone is in its own right a pretty good breaker. It's not the easiest one to switch into, especially if you don't have Gliscor on your team, or something like Blissey, obviously. Um, but I mean, like even if he has something like Garchomp doesn't really want to come in on Flash Cannon. King definitely doesn't want to come in on Flash Cannon. Mamoswine definitely does not want to come in on Flash Cannon. So I mean, the other three grounds don't want to come in on. They don't love coming in on Magnezone, really. Gliscor is the only one that really can, and I mean, if it's chipped enough, then yeah, Gliscor is definitely in Flash Cannon range. I don't think. Now, granted, it's Gliscor, so it definitely has to be a lot more chip than it usually is. But that's still not an amazing interaction that Gliscor is ecstatic to be involved in. So I mean, it definitely can easily be stopped in its tracks, especially as I mentioned, like Garchomp comes in and Choice Specs Volt Switch, and that makes Magnezone pretty sad because all momentum is now gone. But it is pretty hard to really stop it, especially like if you're not running Gliscor, as I said. Oh god. Tangrowth is Amon for me. Really good. I mean, Regen is just a broken ability. I don't think I really need to ramble on about that. And it just has great utility to add on as well. Giga Drain with, I think it has one. Is it 100 or 110? I think it's 110 special attack. So I mean, it's hitting pretty hard with Giga Drain, and then along with that, you get the utility and knockoff that allows for bulky offense and balanced teams to make progress. Well, with stall teams as well, to be quite fair. Yeah, I mean, this thing, it can't be understated how valuable this mod can be on stall. And, Sludge Bomb, which allows for it to not be a complete sitting duck against Flash, but also helps against itself. You're looking at the, it's even able to give, something like Scizor, a couple of fits, if it's not running Sword Stance. It can take, in a pinch, it can take a hit from Lucario, I suppose. Along with, how am I feeling? There's nothing. But I mean, oh yeah, Rotom. How did I forget Rotom Wash? Yeah, this is probably. I was debating whether or not Gastrodon's number 1 or number 2, but this is definitely up there with Gastrodon in terms of being able to switch in on Rotom Wash. I mean, unlike Gastrodon, Tangrowth doesn't really mind being tricked, since it has no recovery moves to really rely on, and it can just switch out and regen 33% of its health back, because regen is a super duper balanced balanced ability. Yeah, I mean, Tangrowth is just, it's a stellar mon. Even something like, if Infernape U-turns on it, it's not going to do all that much. Infernape has to Flare Blitz in order to really do anything to Tang. But I mean, yeah, like, unboosted Lucario isn't really threatening Tang. Non-Fire Blast Garchomp isn't threatening Tang at all. If Garchomp's running Stealth Rock, it's not a threat to Tangrowth at all. Tangrowth is very, very much happy to come in on Garchomp. And on occasion, it can occasionally, that's another thing too, like, Knockoff allows for it to knock off Heatran's leftovers, and along with that, Tangrowth also gets access to Earthquake, which can, get in some chip on Heatran. A respectable amount of chip on Heatran, which is always a good thing. Fuck this mon. This mon is a piece of shit. I hate everything about this mon. Um, you know, Togekiss I feel like is a mon where it counters everything, but at the same time, it loses to everything. It's like it's hard to rank because so oftentimes when this thing comes in, it just everything goes to shit. Nothing ever works out how it's supposed to. It feels like with this thing, so it just feels like it's a hard mon to like reliably rank because like it's good. I hate that I have to say that. Um, but like everything just goes to fucking. This thing will beat like a Heatran one game, and then the next game it will end up losing the fucking Roserade. Like there's no consistency with this goddamn piece of shit. And other than if I play against it, it will fucking get 10 flinches, but uh, that's for another day. I am done talking about that fucking piece of shit, and I will now go to shit mons. Yanmega probably would be viable if it didn't have a 4 times weakness to rocks. I mean, it could definitely. I mean, it's better than Venomoth, I suppose. But I mean, when Heatran's running around all over the tier, it's definitely harder to get Mega consistently involved. Gliscor, I think this might be. Is it a hot take? It probably is. I think Gliscor is in at around A. And, defensively, it's great, obviously. I don't need to talk about, how great Gliscor is defensively, especially with how great it is in current gen. My main gripe with Gliscor is just how passive it can be. And a lot of the metagame doesn't really... a lot of the metagame doesn't really have much of a problem breaking past Gliscor, actually. SD Scizor can, eventually get this +6 and breeze past it. Garchomp, if it's able to force Gliscor to defog, it's able to break through quite easily. I don't think I need to explain why Weavile can. Calm Mind Clef can brute force past it. Starmie, obviously, Pump and Beam. Latias, Psychic and Draco usually pound this thing pretty good. And even something like Infernape hits pretty hard into it on a pretty consistent basis. Like Choice Band Flare Blades, I think it might be a roll even. It's either a 2-hit KO or a roll, I want to say. It's one of the two. Or maybe may not at all, but it still hits into Gliscor pretty hard. And I mean, I just listed all 7 mons that are currently above it, and how they all pretty much have some sort of way of being able to dunk on Gliscor. So I mean, the metagame, I think, is a bit harsh on Gliscor, and Gliscor is also extremely passive, and it can't really use SD at all because unaware Clefable exists. But, I mean, it's still solid on the defensive side. Just not abusable as it is in current gen, per se. Up next is Mamoswine. And Mamoswine is basically what Nidoking would want to be. You are much more... You still kind of had Predict, but, like, you're still much more on the offensive with Mamoswine. Like you have much more to gain when trying to make plays with Mamoswine than you have to lose. You gain more than you lose with Mamoswine, and that is not the case, I believe, with Nidoking, and that's the main separator between the two. And obviously Mamoswine is just fast enough in order to, it's able to speed tie with Togekiss. It's faster than Heatran, able to break through glass door. Probably does a respectable amount to tank, and obviously something like Garchomp doesn't want to stay in on it. It does a good amount to Scizor and Clef as well. I believe if it's Life Orb, it should be able to have it. Well, actually, no. Life Orb, I believe, breaks past Cliff, but never melt Ice. You can still flinch past Clef in that way. So yeah, still pretty solid Mon. I think it's just a slightly better Nidoking. Rotom Wash is next, and this is another A+ Mon. I mean, you want to talk about a Volt Switch Mon that's really annoying to switch into. I was talking about earlier how I don't remember what Mon. Oh, Lucario. I was talking about how Lucario had, the grounds. No, it was Magnezone. It was Magnezone. The grounds don't want to switch on. 3 of the 4 grounds don't want to switch on Magnezone Flash Cannon. Well, all of the 4 main grounds at least, Glasgow, Garchomp, Nidoking, and Mamoswine, none of those 4 really want to switch in on Rotom Wash at all. I mean, really, the only ground that can really do it is Gastrodon, and that Mon is kind of just more so designed to counter Rotom Wash, and Gastrodon also doesn't really want to. Gastrodon also doesn't want to take a Choice Scarf either in that sense. And to, so yeah, you have the Choice Scarf sets. Obviously you have the more offensive set, which is obviously able to slam into, I believe instead of it being like a roll to kill Gliscor, it's like a guaranteed kill. More bulkier star sets, I believe, still do a decent amount of Gliscor. None of the grounds want to switch. I think I said this already, but none of the grounds really want to switch in on Rotom Wash at all. And, it still has utility beyond just the Scarf sets. You look at its special defensive sets, which are able to, if you're looking for something that isn't forced to be, like, as long-term, like on offensive teams, you still want to keep the momentum and switching onto a Starmie. Spit Out for Rotom still works pretty well. You get Discharge, so Latias doesn't switch in as well on you. Along with the possibility of like paralyzing something like Clef or Scizor or something of the such. It's able to fill out multiple different roles depending on the team, and I think Rotom Wash is the best speed control in the game. It's able to, as I said, it's able to, just by its own typing alone and stab combination, it's able to threaten out a lot of different mons, and at the same time, it's able to force in a lot of mons, which makes building around it a lot easier as well. Rotom Mo, it might be C, it might be unranked. The only real reason you'd really use Rotom Mo is if you wanted a Rotom with a good matchup into Wash Tom. That's really the only reason I can realistically think of. In just about any other way, Rotom Mo is worse. I guess other than Gastro, but that's not really all that much worth it. As Elf, I'm going to drop down the B tier. For the most part, you're using this as a suicide lead, and I think Skarmory is a little bit better as a suicide lead in that right. Azelf is obviously faster, and in that mirror, Azelf would obviously be better. But we're talking about Skarm can get a rock and a spike up, whereas Azelf is only getting rock stuff. That's kind of a big difference in that regard. And as I said before, this is Azelf's only breaking sidekicks are both up here, as I already mentioned. And I mean, Azov can't really compete with those two in the breaking department, so it's kind of forced to be in a suicide lead role, in which case it's already kind of facing competition from Skarmory. Up next is Heatran. This is the last of the uh, four mons that I think are the crop of the bunch. You look at Heatran, and it's just able to get like it doesn't have any recovery, but it's able to get it's able to get so much of its health back so easily, and it's also, you know, the best scissor counter in the game. Being able not only quad resisting its stab combo, but also being able to burn it as well. You're also able to burn Weavile. You can burn Garchomp if it's locked in an Outrage. Latias is kind of iffy. It's kind of a weird interaction, but it's whatever. Oh, you also get to trap any sort of Calm Mind Clefables and just make sure they don't get an opportunity to win, which is really nice. You know, in stone matchups, you can trade this for Blissey, which is oftentimes a pretty good trade for the Heatran team. Obviously, I don't need to really talk about Tangrowth or Skarm. Pretty good into Rose. If it's faster than Zone, it's pretty good as well. I mean, those are the main mons. You know, part of the reason why I think Celebi isn't as good is just because it can't, it can't hit Heatran at all with any of its moves. The most it can really do is Leech Seed. That's about it. And, another point that I've made a lot in this video is, just how important it is to have that mon that's able to switch in on Heatran. Just because, like, if you're only switching something like Rotom Wash, well, Rotom Wash can come in on Heatran, a couple of times, but it's not going to want to do it all the time. And, once that Rotom Wash is down, then Heatran becomes really scary, even if it's not like an offensive Scarf or an offensive Spec set. If the rest of the mons you have are neutral to weak to it, then that's when Heatran becomes really, really scary to deal with. Along with it being able to get up rocks pretty easily by itself. Up next is Shaman, and I think this is unranked. I mean, this thing's one niche was taking on Life Orb Crawdont, and I mean, yeah, I guess, but I mean, for the most part, Life Orb Crawdont is still mostly a losing matchup anyways. If it's Bandit Crawdont, then Tangrowth still works fine, and as I said before, Tangrowth is very much appreciated on Skull anyways. You also have, Poliwrath, which I think is probably a much more better option for stall teams. So I don't think Shaman is up to standard here nowadays. Porygon Z, I think for the most part, it's going to be on Volturn. It's able to take advantage of mons out, such as like Tangrowth. It's also able to get in pretty good chip in on Heatran, in which case, if you have a Sword Stand Scizor in the back, it's able to open it up pretty nicely. And I mean, with choice specs, nothing in the metagame really wants to take, other than the obvious. Nothing really wants to come in and take a Tri-Attack. Even like the scales, like Scizor doesn't want to really. I mean, Scizor comes in a lot of stuff already, and now you're asking it to take, a Tri-Attack, which can begin to get really, really dicey really quick, especially when you add on the possibility of it getting burned. Um, like that's definitely not helping out Scizor at all. Um, so I think it has a niche. I mean, other than that, it's pretty frail. You're not gonna see it be all that much bulky. But other than that, it's pretty solid. And then the last one is Mew. Um, Best special pivot in the game. Um, Pretty much gets to decide what it wants to do. I mean, obviously, when you have the access to have every single move, every single TM in a meta game where move pools are oftentimes pretty limited, that's pretty busted. Uh, it kind of shocks me that it took us this long to get Mew all the way up here to A+. Uh, but on top of pretty much being able to learn every move, when it's running specially defensive stats, it feels like this mon just does not die. Um, 100 turns out 100 defenses across the board, and the Sinnoh Dex is pretty good. I think Garchomp does. I think at full, it might have to keep rocks off, but it lives. It avoids a 2 KO from Garchomp Earthquake. Comes into a Heatran pretty well. Obviously shouldn't be your primary Heatran switch in, but it comes in a Heatran pretty well. Comes in a Rotom Wash pretty well. Comes in on any non-banded Infernape attack pretty well. If it's Scarf or if it's Life Orb, it's Mew's pretty decent against it. Good against Starmie. You can run Toxic to take advantage of Clef. Ice Beam takes care of Tang and Gliscor, and the list goes on and on. Yeah, I mean, when you have the option of, this gets to set up Rocks and act as the Fogger. It has the option to run both. And that makes you instantly pretty damn splashable in the metagame. And on top of that, you have Volt Switch and Ice Beam. Obviously with those two, that's basically it's more of like a pivoting Bolt Beam, I would say. It's a defensive Bolt Beam. That makes me pretty annoying to switch into on its own right. And then obviously you can, on occasion, run more offensive sets as well if you're really in the mood to catch people off guard. I definitely think it still has some sort of niche today. It's just harder to build around, especially when you're basically taking out your own splashable especially defensive pivot that's able to come in on so many of the high-powered special moves that are up here in the higher ranks of today's metagame. So yeah, this is my August 2025 viability rankings. This video took way longer than I thought it would, and at this point I'm just happy to be done. So hope that you enjoyed watching me blab on about this topic, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.